and went through my own cancer journey. And it was quite an aggressive form of cancer. I was only 35. I had major abdominal surgery, 3 months of chemo, and it was not good. And it definitely changed my life. That kind of adversity is pretty hard. That's a gift that we get given, and some of us make it through that gift and some of us don't. So that, I think, was another lesson, especially in business. We choose some adventures, some mountains to climb, and then we fall into some pits. And this is definitely a pit I found myself in. Coming back to that touchstone piece of why did you start this in the first place? Like, does that have enough meaning for you to help sustain you through the difficult times? Persistence based on purpose is the most important thing to rely on.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Shivani Gupta. I'm your host. I'm so excited to read this following bio of our guest today. Zoë Routh is a leadership futurist. She's a podcaster and she's a multi-award winning author. She works with leaders and teams to explore what's coming and what is meant for leadership of the future. She's worked with individuals and teams internationally and in Australia since 1987. She's from the wild Canadian rivers and to the outlook back, and she has worked with so many people. You'll work out as we go through that she loves adventure. She also facilitates strategy and culture workshops, and her fourth leadership book, which was called People Stuff, I love that title, was about beyond personality problems. It's about an advanced handbook for leadership, and it won the Book of the Year at the Australian Book Awards in 2020. And her fifth book, which is a leadership futurist science fiction called the Olympus Project, also won a gold medal at the Reader's Favourites Awards in 23. And the list goes on. She's also the producer of the Future of the Leadership podcast, dedicating to asking what if questions. She's an outdoor adventurist. She loves skiing. She's run marathons, survived cancer, loves hiking, and she's married to an Aussie and loves dark chocolate. Welcome, Zoë.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here.
I love your bio, because some bios are like, they achieved this, they did this. So tell us a little bit, Zoë. One of the things I'm always really curious about is that, for you to be able to achieve and do all the amazing things that you've done, there's a lot of adversity that all of us have to face. And I'm just wondering some of the challenges that you face, and I know I read about some of that in your bio, but would you take us through a couple of those moments that really transformed you into who you are?
I'd be delighted to. Thank you for asking. Well, adversity is kind of embedded in adventure. If you're going to do adventurous things, it's likely going to be hard on some level, whether it's a physical challenge or whether it's an emotional challenge of isolation or just dealing with the people that you're with. And I think I learned about adventure when I was 15, and I was invited to go on a 3-week canoe trip by my summer camp counselor. And she sold it like this. She said, it's going to be 3 weeks. It's going to be just 9 of us in canoes. It'll be sunshine and glorious. We'll pull over and have these great little lunches on these beautiful rocks. And it'll be 3 weeks of that. I'm like, hell yeah, that sounds great. And then it was not at all like that. It was stunningly beautiful through Northwest Ontario. That's definitely what came off, but it rained for 3 weeks and we just got saturated. We were never dry. My feet got wrinkled and wriggly. And at one stage too, this is just to add on to the difficulties, we left behind an important part of our tent at our last campsite, which is a little cross piece. And so they called for volunteers to go back to paddle 20 Ks back upstream to get this thing and then come back. And for some reason, my hand snuck up for this little adventure. It was one of the hardest things I'd done up to that point. I was only 15. And so we got up before it was light and started paddling. We made it all the way there, found the little cross piece, and then made our way back to our friends. And I thought they're going to be having dinner ready for us and they'll be all wonderful and they'll celebrate our achievement. But no, we got there and like, all right, quick, we got to do this portage, which means ferrying all our equipment over a hill onto the next lake. So we thought we could just chill out by the time we got there. No, it was like, carry on. It's like, we've got to do this portage, get in the canoes, paddle somewhere else and set up a new campsite. It just was endless. And for some reason that didn't put me off. I still fell in love with adventure, even though it was uncomfortable and difficult. That sort of sense of accomplishment, that sense of coming together as a team, I got hooked on that. And I've continued those kinds of experiences, not always as tough as that, and not always as bad weather as that. But that sense of coming together to achieve something remarkable has really stayed with me. And I think that's carried over into business for sure. So there's that kind of adversity, that the adversity that we choose to put ourselves through. And then there's the adversity that gets shoved at us. And I certainly had a number of adversities like that. The big one was almost 20 years ago now, when I was diagnosed with cancer and went through my own cancer journey. And it was quite an aggressive form of cancer. I was only 35. I had major abdominal surgery, 3 months of chemo, and it was not good. And it definitely changed my life. That kind of adversity is pretty hard, because we don't stump up and say, yes, please, I'll have a dose of cancer. Thank you, just to see how I can survive it. That's a gift that we get given. And some of us make it through that gift and some of us don't. So that, I think, was another lesson, especially in business. We choose some adventures, some mountains to climb, and then we fall into some pits. And this is definitely a pit I found myself in, and needed to work my way out of that through using a lot of inner resilience, a lot of resources, leaning on people around me, and using my mental focus to show up every day to try and do some healing, and not knowing what the outcome might be. And that was probably harder than slugging my way through the bush in pelting rain. Yeah, tough times.
Mm, mm. I really, really like the way, Zoe, that you put that, because often I think of adversity as something that has happened to you, right? That kind of happened and then how you dealt with it. I really like the way that you defined it. This was something I chose, like it was, but I almost chose that experience versus something that happened to me. I really like that. You've worked with so many different businesses, and you continue to. And this is always so hard to surmise, but what maybe it's the most common lessons or the top lessons. What are the learnings that keep coming up that you keep seeing over and over again in business? I would love to, get your perspective on that with the work that you do.
Probably the latest one that is a reminder is that things go in cycles. And I've been running my business for 20 years, and sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. Sometimes you have a flush of clients, and sometimes it's like ghost town. And I think the first time you experience ghost town, it really can be very rattling. I know it was for me. I'm like, panic zone. Am I ever going to get a client again? How am I going to pay my bills? Do I have to go into debt? All this anxiety creeps up. And over the course of 20 years, it's not that long in terms of history of time. It's pretty long time in business, though. You get a sense of that we can make it through this cycle. And talking to another colleague of mine who's been in the same boat, he runs his own business. He's been in business for 20 years. And this is a particularly challenging stretch of time for him, as well as for me and for a number of my colleagues, with cost of living crisis, uncertainty around the world, these global wars. It's having a ripple effect on providers like me. And we share war wounds, and then we go, yeah, we've been here before. We know what it's like to keep pushing through what it feels like a desert. So that's probably the first big lesson, is that these things go in cycle, and we just need to keep carrying on and looking for opportunity for doing something different. During the pandemic, say, for example, when a lot of people, everything shut down completely, I said, right, I'm going to write a book. And I wrote People Stuff, which, as you mentioned, won a number of awards. So I'm like, that was a good use of time. Even though writing that when there was no income coming in, you're like, is this going to move the dial at all? Is this something that's helpful for me or for any of my clients or readers? Knowing somewhere in there was a kernel of like, yes, I have something to offer that will help others. Keep going. That's probably the second insight, is that when we focus on being of service, of solving other people's problems, and less focused on worrying about our own selves, this can often keep our momentum going, and it helps us show up in a different way, in a way that is inviting, magnetic, as opposed to needy and worried, because nobody wants to work with a professional who is like, yeah. We want to work with somebody who's confident and outward focused and in service to us. That's who I'd like to employ if I was hiring a professional to support me. So that's probably the second piece. The third piece is just keep going. It's a question of persistence. And sometimes it's easy to think, I'll just throw in the towel. and just put an end to this. I just don't want to do this anymore. It just takes so much out of me. Coming back to that touchstone piece of why did you start this in the first place? Like, does that have enough meaning for you to help sustain you through the difficult times? So that's probably the third component, that persistence based on purpose is the most important thing to rely on.
Mm, mm. Yeah, beautiful. There's some golden nuggets in there. Let me now go a little bit deeper into people. You know, you've written a book called People Stuff and just all the work that you do around people. And I'm a bit obsessed about, you know, how to engage and retain people as well. So I'm really interested in hearing about, again, are there some experience shares or learnings or top tips that you might have around how do we actually engage people, or how could we do it better? You know, maybe it's coming from a place of missing, but what are you seeing? What have been the lessons learned for the audience that's listening and watching today?
It's the hardest thing about leadership, right? Is dealing with people. It's also the most joyous part of it, is being able to accomplish something with other people and have that sense of, yes, we can do this together. And then quite often you just run into this blah side of things where things don't go as planned and it's quite challenging. So what I've discovered in my research and my experience is, in the research side of things, when I read Dan Pink's book Drive, he mentioned three things that are important for building engaged cultures, and that's having a clear purpose. The second one is making sure your people have a sense of autonomy over which so that where they can make decisions and be proactive to manage their own workload and work life. And mastery, it tends to develop their skills. So purpose, autonomy, and mastery. The additional research I did showed that there's a fourth thing that also encourages to keep people engaged and interested in work, and that is very easy and non-complicated and cost-effective, and that is recognition. Simply saying, that was a really great job, Shivani, that you did on that particular task or that project, and the way that it impacted me and the people around you is this, takes 30 seconds and makes a massive difference to someone's motivation, interest, and sense of purpose. So I think we can add that into our lexicon and toolkit as leaders to help build engaged team. For me, though, I think when it comes down to it, there's two essentials. One is curiosity, really being curious about the people that you work with, showing a genuine interest in who they are, what's important to them, how they like to work, what is meaningful in their work, so you can help them get more of that. So that sense of outward focus on others, that curiosity piece is essential. And the second piece is clarity. What I believe, and what I wrote about in People Stuff, is that it's often not personality problems that are at fault when you have people-based issues. It's often the structures underneath how people work together that drive some of this difficult behavior. So if we have clear structures meaning who's accountable for what, who's responsible for what, by when, how are they going to do that? How do we make decisions? How do we delegate stuff? How do we resolve issues? When all this is made crystal clear, when we have transparent processes around hiring, around promotions, around rewards, a lot of the issues get turned right on low on the old people stuff boiling away in the pots on the stove. They get turned right down and sometimes off. So by having curiosity and clarity, we can help prevent a lot of the issues in the first place. So those are some of the key insights I think would probably be the easiest things for people to walk away with straight away.
You know, as an author and as a strategist and a, you know, podcast producer, all the work that you've done, but also you also shared, Zoe, in terms of some of the challenges that you've had personally, including, you know, cancer 20 plus years ago. Like when challenges come your way, whether they're small, medium, large, some people have a process, some people have a ritual, some people so when they come your way, how do you go about doing it? You know, talk me through, how does that work? Something comes in, how do you break that down and how do you address it?
Well, I think first of all, you need to recognize that you're actually experiencing something crappy. Sometimes it's often quite out of the blue and you're like, wham, oh, and we get disgruntled or uncomfortable or rattled by it. And so that's the first thing, is like recognize you're having a reaction of some sort. And a reaction is usually a distress of some sort. Then once I recognize, oh, I'm going through an experience, I need to hang on a second, anchor myself here. It's not quite a ritual, but more of a process. I am obsessed with perspective. I believe perspective is power. So I spend quite a lot of time working out different perspectives on this particular issue. And I want to go far, deep, and wide on that perspective. Far thinking like, where did this come from? Looking into the past in terms of how have I contributed to this? How has this shown up? And what are the patterns that led to this point? Deep, as in, what are the underlying issues, structures, systems, patterns, values that have led to this particular issue, if I can identify them? And wide, going, what are the repercussions of this? What if I don't deal with this? If I deal with this particular way, how that might flow out. So this development of perspective, I think, is pretty critical. The Stoics have written about this endlessly. Viktor Frankl wrote about it in Man's Search for Meaning. We don't have any other power to us sometimes, especially if we're a prisoner of war, than the power of what's going on in our mind, the power of perspective. So we can choose to make meaning out of whatever happens to us. Why not choose a meaning that's empowering for us, a meaning that helps us take the next best step, a meaning that means this is in service to us, don't know what that means like, means for us, there's probably an opportunity in here, even though it feels like there's not. Take, for example, cancer. Very difficult to find the opportunity in that. And to be honest, I think I just had to wallow and grieve for my life going on this track and then upending and going on this track. There is a part of the process that we have to go through that when we're dealing with a loss of some sort. And knowing that the grieving process of honoring a loss in your life through a challenge is part of the process of stepping forward is also important. So we don't have to beat ourselves up. And I think that was the other part of the weird stuff that went on in my head, particularly through cancer. So I beat myself up for getting cancer in the first place. I'm a coach. I should be able to think positively and not get sick. That was a kind of unhelpful belief I had at the time. It's like, I was a failed coach because I got cancer. That was a belief I had. I'm like, well, that's not serving me or anyone else. So I had to journal my way out of that. So part of the process I used in reflection and gaining perspective is journaling. And then talking to other people and benchmarking my experience against theirs and asking them how they dealt with it. So there's a lot of inward focus and there's a lot of outward focus at the same time, but always looking for a more useful way to approach the challenge is the mission I put myself on when challenges come up.
Amazing. I love the way that you describe that. And I think the people that are watching and listening, there's so many ways of being able to go, okay, like just that belief system, and if you said that to somebody else, they'd go, what do you mean you blamed yourself for having cancer? But the way you describe that belief system actually created some of that and having to shift that at a deep level. Zoe, what's next? What are some of the future aspirations, whether it's going on another big adventure or whether it's doing things in business? Tell me about some of the things that you're wanting to still do.
Yep, still plenty of mountains to climb, literal and figurative. So the literal mountains, I'm I'm organizing some friends to continue walking the Australian Alpine Walking Track, which is a 630 odd kilometer track here in Australia. And we've decided as a cohort to do it in sections. So last year we did 2 sections of it. We did about 200 Ks on the trail. And we're going to do another about the same 200 Ks down in Victoria in April. So that's going to be a big 2-week adventure, climbing up and down mountains. So that's the literal mountain to climb, literal next big adventure. And I continue to write books. I've got essentially 3 in train at the moment. I've got the 4th book in the Gaia series. The third full-length novel, 4th book in the whole universe, coming out by the end of this year, the end of 2024. That's Olympus Rising. And I've started jotting notes for the last novel in that series. So that's kind of going to come to fruition next year. And Power Games, which is my next nonfiction book. I haven't written one since People Stuff came out in 2020. The first draft of that is due in a week or so. So I'm madly scribbling away at Power Games. And it's building a little bit on some of the research and experiences from People Stuff, but really looking at toxic workplaces and the kind of office politics that comes with the territory of being in business. So we're going to unpack that and have a little roadmap of how to get out of that. So those are a couple of the big ones. In terms of business aspirations, over the next 5 to 10 years, I'll be shifting the front wheel of my business to go from doing primarily facilitation to doing primarily books book publishing, and the facilitation will support that. So I'm just rotating the focus of my business over the next 5-10 years, doing more speaking to readers and publishing books, both fiction and nonfiction. Yeah, so plenty of fun little adventures to come.
Wow. And very rarely do I come across people that do both well, fiction and nonfiction, and win awards for them. Like they are really good at one and they start to dabble in the other, or vice versa, but never both. So that's amazing. Really excited to hear about some of the other projects that are coming out. Second to last question, Zoe, is your own mental wellness. You're looking after your own wellness. What sort of rituals do you have? Do you do something once a year? Obviously, I can imagine maybe even climbing mountains would be part of that, because it would be so good. A lot of people I know run and do different things for that. But are there any other things that you do, whether it's yearly, quarterly, daily, that you do to manage your mental wellness?
Well, certainly you mentioned the big one. So going out on adventures and being outdoors is integral to my mental health. And I really need that. I need big views to get big insights. I love being out in the bush. I love camping. I love putting up my tent and, playing house in my tent and just having lots of great fun out in the wilderness. So that's definitely something I need to do every year. Can't do that every day. The body would wear out, that's for sure. And the other aspects from a more regular practice on a daily basis, running, yes, I'm a runner. So I don't run every day. I run about 3 times a week, but I do exercise every day. So getting physical and being able to connect with my body is an important aspect of my grounding. I do meditation. I journal. I have, how many types of journals have I got at the moment? I've got 3 types of journals. I've got a success journal that I write in every day at the end of the day, where I record my achievements for the day. And sometimes it's a big one, like won a prize, yay. And sometimes it's very mundane, it's like sent an invoice, as marginal, as baseline as that. And I just keep stock of the things that are nudging me forward. Sometimes they're big ones and sometimes they're tiny ones. And the success journal is a really great discipline to help keep me focused on, yes, I'm moving forward. Yes, there's positive things going on. And I have another daily journal, which has got 5 years in one, which is pretty cool, where I record beautiful, magical moments from the day. So I have that practice. And then I have another journal practice, which is akin to morning pages, which is just blah, 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 brain dump and just let it all come out. And I dabble in different types of journaling structures, whether it's doing gratitude practice and so on. So journaling is a big part of that. Meditation is another one. What else? And reading. As a big writer, I'm a prolific reader as well. So books help me understand other humans. They take me to different worlds, and I love them. I love learning and I love exploring these different worlds. I love watching and seeing how other readers bring something to life as well. That's pretty cool for me.
Awesome. So if people want to follow you, your work, your books, what are the best platforms to find you on?
Probably the best platform to start off with is LinkedIn. That's pretty easy. If you're a bookie person, then you can find me on Threads. I'll post about that. I also post on Facebook around books. And my podcast is called The Future of Leadership. And if you sign up on my website to be a podcast insider, you get a list of 40 book recommendations on lead strategy and lead performance, as well as a special extra excerpt from People Stuff, audio narration on how to deal with difficult people. So that's a little freebie there. And you can just go to zoerouth.com, click on podcast, and get the Podcast Insider bonus goodies there.
That is beautiful, Zoe. Pleasure having you on today.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, Shivani, and thank you for the work that you're doing with business owners too.
Thank you for tuning in to Engage and Retain People podcast. I hope that today's podcast sparks a new and maybe one idea that you can bring back to your business right away. Take time to connect, listen, and invest in your people, because they are your most valuable asset. If you found value in today's conversation, please subscribe and share this episode with other fellow entrepreneurs and business leaders. And don't forget to leave a review. It helps us manage and reach more people just like you. Join us next week for more actionable insights to keep you on the path to engage and retain your people. Until then, keep going. Keep investing in your people and yourself. This is Shivani. Stay inspired.